There are shocks in life that a person can never forget, but I never imagined my biggest shock would begin simply because I forgot my passport. That morning, I was on my way to LAX for a business trip to London. It was a crucial trip I had been preparing for over several months, but as I stood at the check-in counter, my hands suddenly went ice cold. My passport wasn't in my purse. I was forced to head back home. If I hadn't returned that day, I probably never would have discovered the horrifying truth unfolding behind my back. When the front door of my $1.5 million Malibu beach house opened, I froze. I saw my husband, my mother-in-law, and a real estate agent giving a tour to potential buyers. They were discussing a fire sale price not $1.5 million, not $1.4 million, but a desperate $1.3 million. The house I had worked nearly a decade to buy, the house that was solely in my name. And the person negotiating the sale was my own husband. In that moment, a chilling realization hit me. My missed flight to London wasn't a coincidence. Someone had deliberately made sure I couldn't leave the country. And from that very second, I made a decision that would eventually cause my husband and mother-in-law to lose absolutely everything. I signed the divorce papers that same day, but what they didn't expect was what I did immediately after. An act that cost them both everything. That morning, the sky over the California coast was as clear as a giant sheet of blue glass. The cool breeze carried the salty scent of the Pacific, rustling through the tall palm trees by the front gate. The two-story white modern house sat peacefully on a wide coastal road, with a long stretch of sand and deep blue water extending to the horizon right in the backyard. That was the house I had worked myself to the bone for nearly 10 years to buy. Many people assumed I married rich to live in such a beautiful home. They didn't know that every single brick of this house was built on my sweat and sleepless nights. My name is Lauren. I am 35 years old and the creative director for a high-end interior design firm. 8 years ago, when I married Harry, I believed that as long as we worked hard together, our life would be stable and happy. But after 8 years of marriage, I gradually realized that some men are only good at making beautiful promises while actively dodging any real responsibility. That morning, I was preparing to fly to London. This trip was vital because I was about to sign a massive partnership agreement. If successful, our firm would expand into the European market. I had been prepping for 2 months. Documents, portfolios, blueprints, even small corporate gifts for the clients, everything was neatly packed in my carry-on. In the living room, my mother-in-law, Helen, was sipping her morning coffee. She looked me up and down and slowly said, "If you're going on a business trip, act like it. Don't go over there and get caught up partying with friends while your husband and child are left home with no one to take care of them." I smiled politely, though I was more than used to her passive-aggressive remarks. "Don't worry, Helen. It's only for a week." Harry stood by the sofa, holding his phone. He looked at me and spoke in a very gentle tone, one I hadn't heard from him in a long time. "Don't worry, honey. I've got everything handled here at home." That sentence should have made me feel secure, but for some reason, a strange feeling welled up inside me. It felt like something was quietly happening beneath the surface, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. I bent down to hug my son, Leo, who is 8. "Be a good boy for Grandma, okay? Mommy will bring you back a model airplane." The little boy hugged my neck, beaming. "Make sure it's a big one, Mom." I laughed, grabbed my suitcase, and headed out to the Uber. As the car pulled away from the driveway, I looked back at the house one last time. The morning sun, reflecting off the windows, made it look incredibly radiant and peaceful. But I had no idea that just a few hours later, that peaceful sanctuary would become the epicenter of the biggest storm of my life. LAX was packed that morning. Streams of people rolling luggage, the constant echo of intercom announcements. I stood in the check-in line, reviewing my files and firing off a few work emails. When it was my turn, the airline agent smiled politely. "Passport, please, ma'am." I reached into my designer tote and paused. "It's not here." I frowned, opened the bag wider, and searched again. "It's not here." I unzipped my carry-on, still not here. A freezing chill ran down my spine. I vividly remembered putting my passport in my home office desk drawer last night, right next to my printed itinerary. The agent gently reminded me, "Please check again, ma'am." But I knew for sure. I had forgotten it. I had never made such a stupid mistake in my life. I stepped out of line and called my assistant, Hannah. "Hannah, can you push my meetings in London back a day? I have to go home. Did you forget something?" "My passport." Hannah sounded surprised. "Do you want me to drive to your house and grab it for you? It might be faster." I was about to say yes, but then, for some inexplicable reason, I shook my head, even though she couldn't see me. "No, I'll go back myself." The Uber headed back up the Pacific Coast Highway. During the 40-minute drive, I sat in silence, staring at the traffic outside the window. Suddenly, a series of bizarre details from the past few days flashed through my mind. Harry had been repeatedly asking about the property deed. My mother-in-law kept dropping hints that beachfront property in Malibu was at peak value and selling now would bring in a fortune. Just the day before yesterday, Harry casually asked, "Our house is probably worth over $1, $5 million now, right?" At the time, I thought he was just making conversation. Now, recalling that question made my blood run cold. The Uber pulled up to my gate. As I stepped out, I noticed a strange black SUV parked in the driveway. The front door was unlocked. A terrible premonition surged in my chest. I rolled my suitcase quickly toward the entrance. The door was slightly ajar, and voices echoed from inside. I stopped dead in my tracks when I heard my mother-in-law's voice. "If we do a quick cash sale, $1.3 million is fine. If we wait around, it'll just sit on the market." My heart stopped beating. An unfamiliar man's voice replied, "For a beachfront location like this, $1.3 million is an absolute steal. The important thing is that we sign the paperwork today." Then, Harry's firm voice chimed in. "The signatures aren't a problem. Once the buyers put down the earnest money, it's a done deal." I stood paralyzed outside the door. $1.3 million. Sign today. Earnest money. I took a deep breath and pushed the door wide open. The scene before me made the blood in my veins turn to ice. In the living room, my mother-in-law was sitting in the center of the sofa like the lady of the house. Harry was standing by the coffee table, holding a stack of documents. Next to him was a man in a crisp white dress shirt, clearly a real estate agent, and a middle-aged couple who were looking around the living room. The agent was pointing at the ceiling, saying, "A few minor cosmetic updates, and this place will be stunning." Everyone turned simultaneously at the sound of the door. Harry's eyes widened in sheer panic. "Lauren, why are you home?" I didn't answer. I just looked at the papers in his hand, then scanned my beautiful home, the home that had just been turned into an open house for a fire sale. I walked slowly into the living room. The air instantly became heavy. I stopped right in front of Harry. "What are you people doing in my house?" The entire room fell dead silent. No one spoke a word, but I knew my 8-year marriage had officially begun to crumble at that very second. My question echoed in the spacious living room, but no one answered immediately. The atmosphere was frozen. The sound of the ocean waves crashing outside remained steady, but inside, all sound seemed to have vanished. Harry was the first to regain his composure. He forced a laugh, a smile that clearly revealed his panic. "Did you come back for your passport?" I ignored the question. My eyes remained fixed on the folder in his hands. "You haven't answered my question," I said slowly. "What are you doing in my house?" The man in the white shirt, the realtor, glanced at Harry and quickly stood up. He offered a practiced, nervous smile. "Ah, you must be Lauren, right? I'm Phil, the broker. I'm just showing the house to some prospective buyers today." "Showing the house?" I repeated. I took a few more steps inward. The middle-aged couple looked at each other awkwardly. The woman whispered to her husband, "Maybe we should go." But the man lingered, looking at me with curiosity. I turned to Harry. "Explain." Harry put the folder down on the table and crossed his arms, trying to look calm. "It's just an appraisal viewing. It's nothing." I looked down at the coffee table. There was a stack of papers, a pre-drafted purchase agreement, a wire transfer form for earnest money, and a photocopy of the property deed. I picked up the deed. The sole owner listed was crystal clear, Lauren. I held the paper up to Harry's face. "Then why does this purchase agreement list you as the authorized seller?" Before Harry could speak, my mother-in-law, Helen, aggressively chimed in. Why are you making such a scene? Your husband and wife. If he wants to sell the house, he sells the house. I turned to look at her. The sheer ice in my eyes made her pause. Sell my house? I asked. Helen scoffed. Why hold on to it? It's a huge house. You both work all day. It's a waste of assets just sitting here. I let out a dry, humorless laugh. A waste? I turned back to Harry. You were going to sell this house. Harry sighed, his voice edging on impatient. Lauren, don't make a scene in front of the guests. We can talk about this in the bedroom. No need, I said bluntly. We'll talk right here. The middle-aged couple became extremely uncomfortable. The man turned to Harry. Harry, we'll come back another time. I raised my hand to stop them. There's no need to come back. I looked straight at the buyers, because this house is not for sale. The room fell silent again. Harry frowned. Lauren, I slammed the paper down on the table. This house is in my name. I bought it with my separate funds. I have never agreed to sell it. Phil, the broker, immediately started sweating. He turned to Harry. Harry, what is this? It's just a misunderstanding, Harry snapped. I stared him down. A misunderstanding? You brought a broker and buyers into my home. You drafted an agreement for $1.3 million. You call that a misunderstanding? Helen suddenly stood up. Watch your tone. This house belongs to my son too. I looked at her. No, it doesn't. My answer was so short and sharp it choked her off. I continued, my voice calm but freezing. I bought this house with my money. The deed is in my name alone. If you'd like, I can read you the California real estate statutes regarding separate property. Harry slammed his hand on the table. Lauren, that's enough. I looked at him. For the first time in years, I looked at this man and felt zero familiarity. You tried to sell my house behind my back, and you're telling me that's enough? Harry gritted his teeth. I was doing it for the family. The family. I laughed. I stepped closer to him. Which family? The family where you secretly liquidate your wife's assets for a fraction of what they're worth. Harry stammered. The real estate market is tough right now. $1.3 million cash is a good deal. I stared at him for a long time before asking a question that made him freeze entirely. How much money do you owe? The air in the room instantly turned to stone. Harry looked away. Helen frantically interjected. He doesn't owe anything. He just needs capital for a business venture. I kept my eyes locked on Harry. How much? He didn't answer. Suddenly, the puzzle pieces fell into place. The questions about the home's value. The times he sneaked out to the balcony to make phone calls, and my passport disappearing this morning. A chilling thought crossed my mind. I asked slowly, Where is my passport? Harry flinched. I don't know. I took a step closer. You took it, and you're telling me you don't know? I looked deep into his eyes. Then why were you in my home office this morning? Harry was speechless. Right at that moment, Leo came walking down the stairs. The little boy looked around in confusion. Mommy, you're back? I turned, my voice softening instantly. Yes, honey. Mommy forgot something. Leo nodded, then said innocently, Daddy took your blue folder out of your desk drawer this morning. The entire room went dead. Harry immediately yelled, He's just a kid. He doesn't know what he's talking about. But it was too late. I looked at him. My eyes held no anger anymore, only cold disappointment. You stole my passport to keep me in the country, didn't you? Harry didn't answer, but his silence was a confession. I turned to the broker. Phil. He jumped. Yes, ma'am? Listen closely. If you ever bring another person to view this property without my legal signature on a listing agreement, I will sue you for facilitating a fraudulent real estate transaction and report your license to the state board. Phil turned pale. Yes, I understand. The buyers quickly stood up. We're so sorry, we had no idea. I nodded. It's not your fault. Minutes later, the living room was empty. The broker and the buyers practically ran out. The massive beach house suddenly felt terrifyingly quiet, leaving only 3 people, me, Harry, and my mother-in-law. I set my purse on the table, pulled out my phone, and dialed a number. Helen glared at me. Who are you calling? I put the phone to my ear. Vicky? My cousin's voice came through the line. Hey, Lauren. I spoke slowly, emphasizing every word. I need you to come to my house right now. Bring the divorce papers. The ceramic coffee mug in Helen's hand slipped and shattered on the hardwood floor. Harry turned chalk white. Lauren, are you crazy? I looked at him, my voice chillingly calm. No. I just woke up. After the broker and the buyers left, the massive living room felt eerily silent. All that could be heard was the ocean breeze rattling the palm fronds outside and the ticking of the wall clock. I stood in the middle of the room, looking around at my familiar home. Everything was exactly as I had curated it. The cream-colored sectional sofa I picked out, the custom walnut coffee table, the landscape painting I bought during a trip to Carmel 3 years ago. All of this was built by my own hands. Yet, just one morning away, and it was almost stolen from me. Harry stood a few feet away, his face tight. My mother-in-law stood by the sofa with her arms crossed, glaring at me as if she were the victim. Lauren, you're taking this way too far. Harry broke the silence. I didn't reply. I bent down and picked up the stack of documents. Among them was the pre-drafted purchase agreement, seller, Lauren. But on the signature line underneath, for authorized representative, it clearly printed, Harry, legal spouse. I stared at the paper for a few seconds before slowly looking up. Were you planning to forge my signature? Harry flinched. I didn't do anything yet. I smirked. You just didn't have the time. Helen immediately cut in. Watch how you speak to him. My son did this for the family. I turned to her. Which family? This family, obviously, she yelled. I looked her dead in the eyes. The family that plans to secretly sell the daughter-in-law's house? Helen's face turned red. This house is my son's house too. No, it isn't. Those 3 words shut her up. I dropped the contract back onto the table. I bought this house with my money. The deed is in my name. Even the furniture was paid for from my private accounts. Harry snapped, frustrated. Lauren, what are you saying? Am I not your husband? I looked at him. For the first time, looking at this man, I felt completely detached. No anger, no pain, just cold clarity. You are my husband, I said, but you are not the owner of this house. Harry clenched his fists. Do you have to be so calculated? We're married. Why is it always my money and your money? I interrupted him. Then tell me, how much are you in debt? The question sliced through the air like a knife. Harry froze. Helen loudly deflected. He's not in debt, I told you. I kept my eyes on Harry. How much? He remained silent. And that silence told me everything. The times he slipped out to the patio to take calls. The nights he came home late looking stressed. The strange text messages popping up on his lock screen that were quickly swiped away. It all formed a crystal-clear picture. I took a deep breath. You were going to sell this house to pay off your debts, weren't you? Harry still didn't speak, but his eyes gave him away. Helen immediately changed her tone, shifting to a pleading whine. Lauren, honestly, Harry was just trying to flip some investments. If we sell this house, we can pay it off and buy another one later. I let out a laugh that made both of them squirm. Selling a $1.5 million house for $1.3 million to flip investments? Harry groaned defensively. The market is bad. I looked at him. Or are loan sharks breathing down your neck? He looked away instantly. Just that tiny micro-expression was all I needed. The room went quiet before I asked another question. Who do you owe? Harry got angry. Lauren, this is my business, okay? You tried to sell my house, I stated. That makes it my business. Helen slammed her hand on the table. Enough, he is your husband. I turned to her. Yes, but his debt is not my debt. That silenced her. Right then, my phone buzzed. A text from Vicky. On my way. I have the files. I stared at the screen for a second, then put the phone away. Harry was losing his composure. Lauren, you're not actually doing this, are you? Do you think I'm joking? He stepped closer. Lauren, we can talk about this. We can fix it. I shook my head slowly. No, Harry frowned. Why? I looked deep into his eyes. because I just realized something. He stayed quiet. I continued, my voice terrifyingly steady. For 8 years, I thought I was living with a partner. I didn't know, I paused, that I was living with a man willing to steal and sell his wife's home. Harry's fists tightened. Lauren, but I had already turned my back. I walked out to the balcony, looking out at the Pacific Ocean. The waves were still crashing beautifully against the white sand. Out there, the world was as peaceful as ever. But inside me, everything had irrevocably changed. This 8-year marriage was over. And this time, I wasn't going to hold back. The air inside the house was so thick, you could feel everyone's heartbeat. After I declared the marriage over, Harry stood paralyzed. My mother-in-law paced like a cornered animal. Outside, the wind picked up, making the sheer white curtains flutter wildly. The afternoon sun pierced through the massive floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a golden glare on the floor. Everything looked as gorgeous as it did every day. But inside, the peace was shattered. Harry broke the silence first. "Lauren, you can't throw everything away over a minor issue like this." I turned back. "A minor issue?" He stepped toward me, his voice dropping. "I admit I was wrong for not telling you first, but I was just trying to get some liquid cash for a deal. We're married. If we start drawing a hard line on everything, what's the point?" I stared at him for a few seconds. "How much do you owe?" Harry looked away. "I told you." "It's my problem." I nodded slowly. "Right. If you owed a few $1,000s on a credit card, it would be your problem." I rested my hands on the console table, locking eyes with him. "But if you're in so deep that you have to secretly liquidate your wife's $1.5 million asset, it is no longer just your problem." Harry stiffened. It was just a fraction of a second, but I saw the sheer panic in his eyes. I knew I had guessed right. Helen chimed in again. "Lauren, stop pressing him." I looked at her. "You knew, didn't you?" Helen hesitated, then quickly looked away. That was all the confirmation I needed. I smirked. "So you both knew." Harry grew agitated. "Lauren, don't blow this out of proportion." I walked over to the coffee table and unzipped his leather briefcase sitting there. Harry immediately lunged to grab it back. "What are you doing?" But I was faster. I pulled out a thick stack of papers. One glance was all it took. Promissory notes. I flipped through them. A note for $200,000. A note for $150,000. A note for $150,000 more. Some were handwritten agreements with private lenders detailing extortionate interest rates. I skimmed the numbers. The more I read, the colder I felt. Finally, I dropped the stack on the table. $500,000. Harry was silent. I looked at him. "You owe $500,000. The room was deathly quiet. I turned to my mother-in-law. "Since when did you know about this?" Helen shifted uncomfortably. "Just recently." I laughed out loud. "So that's why you were in such a rush to sell the house." Harry gripped the edge of the sofa. "I told you. I was going to pay it back." "How?" I asked. He didn't answer. I continued. "You sell this house for $1.3 million cash. You pay off your $500,000 debt. That leaves you with $800,000. I stared straight through him. "What were you planning to do with the other $800,000? Harry snapped defensively. "I wanted to reinvest it." I shook my head. "No." He stopped. "You weren't going to reinvest it." I pulled out my phone, opened an image, and shoved the screen in his face. It was a screenshot of a text message. Sender. "Deanna. Message. Once you sell the house, we'll buy our own place, okay? I don't want to live with your mother." The room froze. Harry turned chalk white. "Where did you get that?" "It doesn't matter," I said flatly. "What matters is that you plan to sell my house to pay off your debts and use the rest of my equity to go play house with your mistress." Helen gasped. "What?" Harry panicked. "It's not what it looks like." But I was too exhausted to hear another lie. I turned to Helen. "You just said your son was selling the house for the family." I pointed at the phone. "This is his new family." Helen stared at the photo for a moment, then turned to her son. "Harry, what is the meaning of this?" "Mom, I don't want to hear it." I turned and walked toward the stairs. Vicky is almost here. Harry jumped. Lauren, what are you doing? I stopped on the stairs, looked back at him, and my eyes were terrifyingly calm. I am divorcing you, Helen screamed. You wouldn't dare. I dare, I said, emphasizing every syllable. But that isn't what you two need to worry about the most. Harry frowned. What do you mean? I looked at the massive house around me and delivered a sentence that left them both paralyzed. After the divorce is filed, I'm going to do one more thing. I took another step up the stairs, and when I do, I locked eyes with Harry. You will understand what it means to lose absolutely everything. The beachfront house was bathed in the warm afternoon sun, but the atmosphere inside was so cold, it was hard to breathe. After my declaration on the stairs, the living room descended into a suffocating silence. Harry stood frozen. Helen looked back and forth between me and her son, utter panic in her eyes. She clearly hadn't anticipated things going this far. I walked slowly up to the second floor and opened the door to my home office. This was where I sketched designs, managed company projects, and pulled all-nighters to meet deadlines. Today, it was the room where I would end my marriage. I pulled open my desk drawer and took out a blue folder, the same folder Harry had sneaked into to steal my passport this morning. I stared at it for a moment, then set it on the desk. Not long after, the doorbell rang. Vicky had arrived. From the top of the stairs, I watched my cousin walk in. Vicky was dressed in a sharp gray suit, carrying her signature leather briefcase. The moment she stepped into the living room, she felt the tension. Hi, Lauren, Vicky called out. She glanced at Harry and Helen and gave a curt, professional nod. Harry. Helen. Helen glared at her with pure disdain. What are you doing here? Vicky answered calmly. I am an attorney. Lauren retained me to handle some legal matters. Hearing legal matters, the color drained from Harry's face again. Lauren, you're really doing this. I walked down the stairs. Did you think I was acting? Vicky opened her briefcase and placed a thick stack of documents on the coffee table. This is a petition for dissolution of marriage and a motion for a temporary restraining order on the dissipation of marital and separate assets. Harry rushed forward, his voice desperate. Lauren, calm down. We can talk this out. I looked at him. For 8 years, I've done enough talking. Vicky handed me a luxury pen. I took it. In that split second, I remembered my wedding day 8 years ago. I had held a pen just like this to sign our marriage license. Back then, I thought I was stepping into a beautiful new chapter. I never thought 8 years later I'd be signing a document to destroy it all. I signed my name with sharp, decisive strokes. My hand didn't shake once. Harry was devastated. Lauren. I put the pen down. Done. Helen slammed the table. Are you actively trying to destroy this family? I turned to her. This family was destroyed the second you two decided to put my house on the market. Helen turned red with rage. You think a divorce solves everything. My son is still Leo's father. Yes, I said. He will always be my son's father. I looked at Harry. But he will no longer be my husband. The silence returned, heavy enough to amplify the sound of the waves outside. Harry collapsed onto the sofa, burying his face in his hands. Lauren, I messed up. I know I messed up. I won't sell the house. I looked down at him. No. He looked up. No? I shook my head. You aren't saying that because you know you're wrong. You're saying it because you got caught. Harry stiffened. I continued. If I hadn't come back from the airport today, there would already be earnest money sitting in escrow. He fell silent. I turned to Vicky. Is it done? Vicky nodded. Yes. She opened her MacBook and turned the screen toward me. I just filed a lis pendens, a notice of pending action with the county recorder's office. As of right now, there is a hard freeze on this property's title. Absolutely no one can initiate a transfer of deed or sale without a judge's order. Harry gasped. Lauren, did you think I was just going to sign divorce papers and leave it at that? I asked. Vicky continued. I also contacted ADT. They'll be here this evening to rekey all exterior doors, change the smart locks, and reset the security camera system. Helen shrieked. Are you kicking us out onto the street? I looked at her. No. I'm just securing what belongs to me. Harry jumped up. Lauren, if you do this, where are my mom and I supposed to go? I stared straight into him. You owe $500,000. You can sell your car. You can sell your shares in your business. You can sell anything that belongs to you. I paused. But you will not touch my house. The living room was completely silent. Then, I added a sentence that left Harry utterly bewildered. But don't worry. Harry looked at me, confused. After the divorce, I offered a faint smile. I still have one more thing to do. Vicky looked at me, slightly surprised. What thing? I didn't answer immediately. I walked back out to the balcony, looking down at the PCH. In the distance, the sun was sinking into the ocean, painting the sky a fiery orange. I turned back and looked right at Harry. You owe $500,000, right? He nodded weakly. I spoke slowly. Then tomorrow, I will help you pay off that debt. Everyone in the room was stunned. Harry looked at me, unable to believe his ears. What did you just say? I smiled. You heard me. Tomorrow I will pay off your debt in full. But what Harry didn't know was that the price of that money would make him regret his life choices forever. After I said tomorrow, I will help you pay off that debt. The room fell so quiet it felt as though someone had hit the mute button on the universe. Harry stood frozen in the middle of the room, his eyes wide. Lauren, are you serious? I didn't answer right away. I leaned casually against the balcony railing, watching the Pacific Ocean shift into the dark, burnt orange of dusk. Finally, I turned back. Do I look like I'm joking? Harry took a step toward me, his voice suddenly urgent. Lauren, if you bail me out this time, I swear I'll start over. I'll make things right. I looked at him. 8 years ago, I heard him say I swear 1,000,000 times. Today, those words meant absolutely nothing to me. You don't need to swear anything, I said. Harry hesitated. Then, what do you want? I smiled faintly. You'll find out tomorrow. My answer only made him more anxious. Helen finally stepped forward, her aggressive tone completely disappearing. Lauren, sweetie, if you really are going to help Harry clear his debt, I am so grateful. I looked at her. For 8 years, this woman had treated me like an outsider, an inconvenience. But the second I mentioned paying off her son's massive debt, her attitude did a 180. I didn't blame her. Human greed often makes people forget their pride. Don't thank me yet, Helen, I said. She froze. Because what I'm doing might not be a good thing for Harry. Harry frowned. Lauren, what does that mean? I didn't elaborate. I turned to my cousin. Vicky, stay for dinner? Vicky nodded. Sure. Dinner that night was the most bizarre meal of my 8-year marriage. The dining table held our usual food: salmon, asparagus, a salad, but no one spoke. Harry barely touched his plate. He kept stealing glances at me, his eyes full of suspicion. His mind was likely racing through every possible scenario. Why would I pay his debt? What was my endgame? Did I still love him? He had no idea that my decision had absolutely nothing to do with love. After dinner, Vicky followed me up to my office. She closed the door and looked at me. Are you seriously going to pay off his debt? I opened my laptop and pulled up a file. No. Vicky looked shocked. No? I spun the laptop around so she could see the screen. It was a detailed spreadsheet I had compiled of Harry's debts based on the documents in his briefcase. Every loan, the date of execution, the private lenders' names, the astronomical interest rates. Vicky scanned the rows and let out a low whistle. Where did you get this? His briefcase. Vicky shook her head. Harry is out of his mind. These are all hard money lenders, sharks. I nodded. Exactly. That's why he was so desperate to fire sale the house. Vicky sat down. So what's your plan? I leaned back in my chair, speaking slowly. Tomorrow, I am going to meet with all of his creditors. Vicky frowned. To do what? I looked out the window. The ocean was turning pitch black. To pay off the debt. Vicky was confused. But you just said you weren't going to pay his debt. I turned back to her. Exactly. I smiled. I'm not paying his debt. Vicky stayed silent for a few seconds. Then, her eyes widened. Hold on. Do you mean? I nodded. Yes. I said it clearly, word by word. I am going to pay myself. Vicky burst out laughing. Oh my God. You are an absolute genius. I shrugged. He wanted to sell my house to pay his creditors. So, I will pay his creditors, and then take everything. Vicky nodded in approval. But I don't think Harry will just roll over and accept that. I looked down at the files on my desk. He doesn't have a choice. Vicky tilted her head. Why? I closed the laptop and delivered a line that even surprised Vicky. Because starting tomorrow, I looked out into the dark night. He won't be in debt anymore. He won't be in debt? I smiled. Right. Because all of his creditors will be replaced by me. Vicky sat stunned for a moment, then chuckled. Lauren, I'm actually starting to feel sorry for him. I stood up to turn off the office light. Before walking out the door, I said softly, Don't be. Because after tomorrow, I paused. His worst nightmare is just beginning. The next morning, the sky over Malibu was a dull, pale gray, warning of an unusual day ahead. The ocean wind blew harder than usual, making the palm trees sway and rustle loudly. I woke up very early. The house was dead quiet. Helen and Harry likely hadn't slept a wink after last night. As for me, for the first time in years, my mind was incredibly clear. When a person makes a definitive choice, the fear disappears. I changed into a sharp cream-colored pantsuit, tied my hair back neatly, and applied my everyday makeup. Looking in the mirror, I saw a woman entirely different from the one yesterday. Calmer, colder, and infinitely stronger. When I went downstairs, Harry was already sitting in the living room. He looked like he hadn't slept at all, dark circles under his eyes, his face exhausted. In front of him was a cold cup of coffee. He looked up at me. Where are you going? I pulled out a chair opposite him and sat. To pay your debt. Harry paused for a few seconds. Lauren, are you serious? I took a sip of water. Do you think I'm playing a game? He sighed, his face a mix of hope and anxiety. Lauren, if you help me this time, I will. I held up my hand. Save it. Harry went quiet. I looked at him and asked, Did you set up the meeting with your lenders? Harry nodded. I called them last night. Where? The Grand Roast Cafe. Downtown. I nodded. Let's go, then. Harry stared at me, trying to read my mind, but eventually, he stood up. Helen walked out of the kitchen right at that moment. Where are you two going? Harry said, Lauren is helping me clear the debt. Helen's eyes immediately lit up. Really, Lauren? I gave a tight smile. Yes. She sighed in profound relief and even patted my shoulder. I knew it. You're a smart, reasonable girl. I didn't say anything. Only Vicky and I knew that today was not going to be as simple as they thought. The Grand Roast was located on the upper floor of a downtown high-rise, overlooking the coastline. When we walked in, I immediately spotted 3 men sitting at a corner table. They were dressed casually, but carried the cold, intimidating aura of businessmen who did not like to have their time wasted. Harry walked up to them. Tony, Marcus, Brad. One of the men, about 40, stood up. Look who finally decided to show his face. His tone was anything but friendly. The second man, Marcus, smirked. We thought you skipped town, Harry. Harry looked nervous. No, of course not. I'm here to settle the debt today. All 3 men shifted their gaze to me, eyes full of curiosity. I walked forward and pulled out a chair. Gentlemen, the man named Tony asked, You the wife? I nodded. He frowned. Do you know how much your husband owes us? I nodded again. 500,000. The 3 men looked at each other. They clearly didn't expect me to know the exact figure. Marcus let out a short laugh. So, what's the plan, lady? I opened my designer bag and pulled out a manila folder. The 3 men immediately sat up straighter. Harry looked at me with immense hope, but I didn't pull out a checkbook. I slid the folder across the table toward them. Before I pay, I need you all to sign these. Tony picked up the papers. What is this? An assignment of debt agreement. All 3 men stared at me. Brad asked, What do you mean? I spoke calmly. It's very simple. I will wire the full $500,000 to your accounts right now. In exchange, I paused for a second. All of Harry's promissory notes are transferred to my name. Harry froze. Lauren, what are you doing? I ignored him. I continued addressing the lenders. Once you sign, you are completely cashed out, and you have absolutely no further business with Harry. Tony stared at me for a few seconds, then threw his head back and laughed. You are one ruthless woman. He looked at Harry. You're lucky, man. But Harry wasn't laughing. Lauren, you don't need to do this. I turned to look at him, my eyes devoid of emotion. You're right. I don't need to. I looked around the table and smiled. But I want to. Vicky, who had joined us and was sitting beside me, took a sip of her coffee, suppressing a grin. She knew exactly what was happening. After a few minutes of reviewing the contracts, the three lenders happily signed. To them, getting their principal and interest paid out in full today was a massive win. They didn't care whose name was on the wire transfer. I authorized the wires on my phone. $500,000 vanished from my private investment accounts in a matter of seconds. Tony stood up and shook my hand. Lauren, a pleasure doing business with you. I smiled politely. I hope we never have to meet under these circumstances again. The three men left. The table was reduced to me, Vicky, and Harry. Harry looked at me, completely baffled. Lauren, why did you do that? I looked at him. Because from this moment on, I tapped the freshly signed agreements on the table. You don't owe them a dime. Harry let out a massive sigh of relief. But a second later, I delivered a sentence that made his heart stop. You don't owe them. I looked straight into his eyes. But as of today, you owe me. The morning rush at the Grand Roast had died down. The sunlight filtered through the massive glass windows, glinting off the distant ocean waves. The space was upscale and quiet. But for Harry, the air had just been sucked out of the room. He sat paralyzed at the table, his eyes glued to the newly signed stack of papers. I took a sip of my latte, as calm as if I had just closed a routine vendor contract at work. Harry stared at me. Lauren, what did you just say? I put my cup down. You heard me. He swallowed hard. I owe. You? I nodded. Yes. Vicky leaned back in her chair, watching Harry with intense amusement. Harry forced a laugh. Lauren, stop playing around. I pushed the folder toward him. Read it. Harry opened the file. On the first page was the assignment of debt signed by the lenders. Right underneath, it was a new document, a personal promissory note. Borrower, Harry. Lender, Lauren. Principal amount, $500,000. Term, 90 days. Harry finished reading and turned ghost white. Lauren, you're serious? I looked at him. Did you think I wired $500,000 out of my account just to run a charity? Harry slammed the folder onto the table. But you're my wife, I replied flatly. Not for much longer. The statement choked him. He looked down for a moment, then muttered, Lauren, I know I messed up. I thought about it a lot last night. I never should have hid the debt from you. I shook my head. No. Harry looked up. No? Your mistake wasn't hiding the debt, I said. Your mistake was trying to sell my house. He fell silent. I looked at him. I just bought your freedom from loan sharks. But that doesn't mean you're free from consequences. Harry groaned. I can't come up with $500,000 in 90 days. I nodded. I know. He stared at me. Then why did you do this? I smiled. Because I wanted to give you an opportunity. He frowned. An opportunity to do what? I looked out at the ocean. An opportunity to understand what it feels like to owe someone everything. Harry stiffened. Vicky let out a quiet chuckle, quickly covering her mouth. I continued. 90 days. In the next 3 months, you can do whatever it takes to pay me back. Liquidate your retirement accounts. Sell your car. Empty your business accounts. I paused for a beat, but this time, you can't sell my house. Harry clenched his fists tightly. Lauren, you're doing this just for revenge. I looked at him. No, I said softly. This is called equity. A long silence stretched between us. Finally, he asked, and if I default in 90 days? I looked directly into his eyes. Then I will sue you, bankrupt you, and garnish every paycheck you earn for the rest of your life. Harry let out a bitter laugh. You'd really do that to your own husband? I tilted my head. Did you forget? I said slowly. We're getting a divorce. That sentence hung in the air like a guillotine. Harry didn't say another word. He stood up, walked over to the glass partition, and stared down at the street below. After a while, he came back. "Lauren, let me ask you one last thing." I nodded. "Ask." He looked at me, his eyes exhausted. "If you hadn't come back from LAX yesterday, would you have ever known?" I thought for a few seconds before answering. "Probably not." Harry smiled bitterly. "Then I guess it was fate." I didn't say anything. Vicky just shook her head slightly. Harry turned to me. "Lauren, you think this is over, don't you?" I frowned. "Meaning?" He looked at me, and the panic from earlier was gone. It was replaced by something that looked remarkably like desperate resolve. "I am going to pay you back." I shrugged. "Good." But Harry kept going. "And when I do," he glared at me, "I'm going to take back everything that's mine." I raised an eyebrow. "Take back what?" He didn't answer. He just said one final thing before turning and walking out of the cafe. "This game is far from over." I watched his back as he walked to the elevator. Vicky leaned in and whispered, "What do you think he's going to do?" I took a slow sip of the last of my coffee, giving a faint smile. "He got one thing right." Vicky looked curious. "What?" I looked out at the Pacific. "The game." I set my cup down. It's only just started. After Harry left the cafe, the space felt unusually tranquil. The soft jazz playing in the background, the low hum of customers chatting. But for me, the world had shifted. I stared out at the ocean. The deep blue water stretched endlessly, the waves rolling in as if the chaos of the last 24 hours hadn't happened at all. Vicky sat across from me, her chin resting on her hand, watching the spot where Harry had disappeared. Harry doesn't strike me as the type to just roll over and surrender. I smiled faintly. "I agree." Vicky raised an eyebrow. "Aren't you worried he'll try something?" I shook my head. If he were smart, he'd be scrambling to find the cash. But unfortunately, Harry has never been very smart. Vicky laughed. "True." We got up and left the cafe. As we stepped outside, the wind had picked up considerably. The sky was darkening, warning of an impending California coastal storm. Vicky drove me back to Malibu. On the way, she suddenly asked, "Are you going to tell the other woman?" I looked at her. "Diana?" Vicky nodded. "She probably thinks she's about to marry a millionaire." I leaned back against the leather seat, looking out the window. The text message from last night flashed in my mind. "Once you sell the house, we'll buy our own place. Okay?" I sighed softly. "Not yet." Vicky was curious. "Why?" I stared straight ahead at the highway. "Because I want to see how long she sticks around once she realizes he's broke." Vicky burst out laughing. "You are delightfully evil." I didn't deny it. "No," I said slowly. "I'm just realistic." When I got back to the house, Helen was waiting anxiously in the living room. The second I walked in, she rushed over. "Lauren, did you pay off the debt?" I set my purse on the console table. "It's handled." Her eyes lit up. "Really?" "Yes." She exhaled a massive breath of relief. "Oh, thank God. I knew you were a reasonable girl." I looked at her for a few seconds before speaking. "But as of today, Harry owes the $500,000 to me." The smile instantly vanished from her face. "Ours. If you?" I nodded. $500,000. She froze. "Are you insane?" I shrugged. "You can ask Harry." Right on cue, the front door opened. Harry walked in. His face was tight, his eyes exhausted. Helen spun around. "Harry, she says you owe her $500,000. What is she talking about?" Harry stood silent for a moment, then nodded. "It's true." Helen practically screamed. "Oh my God. Why would you do this, Lauren?" I answered calmly. "So he understands what it costs to borrow." Harry didn't say a word. He walked straight past us and went upstairs. Helen stood in the middle of the room, shaking with anger. "You are taking this too far." I didn't bother arguing. I walked up to the second floor. As I passed the master bedroom, I heard Harry's phone ring. The door wasn't completely shut, so I caught his voice. "I'm stressed, yeah, but don't worry. I'm going to fix this." A woman's voice replied through the speaker. It was quiet, but loud enough for me to hear. Diana, I realized. I'm just scared you're going to go back to your wife, she said. Harry answered immediately. No way. I stood perfectly still in the hallway. His voice continued. I just need a little more time. Then, everything will be ours. I smirked. Harry actually thought I couldn't hear him. He still believed he could flip the board and win, but he had no idea he was playing right into my hands. I walked up to the third-floor terrace and stepped out. The wind was howling, whipping my hair around my face. I pulled out my phone, went to my contacts, and dialed a number. Vicky answered on the first ring. Lauren, I need you to pull a background check on Diana, I said. Vicky was quiet for a second. What are you going to do? I looked out at the churning ocean, my voice perfectly level. I want to meet her. Vicky was surprised. You're going to tell her everything. I shook my head, even though she couldn't see me. No, I said softly. I just want to. I paused. Let her see reality. Because sometimes, reality is what hurts the most. By that afternoon, the coastal sky had turned a gloomy, pale gray. Thick clouds rolled in from the Pacific, blocking out the California sun. The wind battered the palm trees in my front yard, bringing the heavy scent of salt water. I stood on my second-floor balcony, looking down at the PCH. Traffic moved steadily, just like any other day, but inside, I felt strangely serene. When you finally see the truth clearly, fear ceases to exist. Barely an hour after I spoke with Vicky, she emailed me a complete dossier on Diana. Full name, Diana Pierce. 28 years old. Occupation: marketing associate for a luxury cosmetics brand. Single. I looked at her profile photo. She was young, gorgeous, dressed impeccably, with a face that looked almost innocent. At a glance, it was hard to imagine she was actively sleeping with a married man with a child. But the detail that caught my eye wasn't the photo. It was her workplace. Pacific Coast Galleria. I smirked. It was a high-end mall I frequented for client meetings. This was going to be easier than I thought. Around 4 p.m., I drove my Range Rover to the Galleria. The mall was bustling. Bright lights reflected off the polished marble floors, and the ambient pop music echoed through the halls. I walked casually past the storefronts, looking like any other wealthy shopper. According to Vicky's intel, Diana worked on the third floor in the cosmetics department. When I approached the massive beauty counter at the corner of the concourse, I spotted her immediately. Diana was standing behind the glass display, wearing a chic cream uniform, her long hair perfectly styled, her makeup flawless. She was laughing with a female customer. Her smile was incredibly natural, just like any young woman living a stress-free life. I stood a few yards away, quietly observing her. The text message from last night flashed in my mind again. Once you sell the house, we'll buy our own place, okay? I took a breath and walked over. Once her customer left, I stopped in front of the counter. Diana put on her professional, glowing smile. Hi there. Are you looking for anything specific today? I stared at her for a few seconds, before saying softly, You're Diana, right? Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second. Yes. Do I know you? I nodded. You could say that. She looked at me, intrigued. Are you? I looked right into her eyes. Harry's wife. Just 3 words, but they made all the color drain from Diana's face. She froze, completely paralyzed. What? What did you say? I gave a tight, polite smile. I am Harry's wife. Diana took a step back, her eyes wide with panic. You have the wrong person. I held up a hand. Don't worry, I didn't come here to make a scene. She stared at me, still terrified. I just want to talk, I said. Diana stayed silent for a few seconds, nervously glancing around to see if her coworkers were watching. Give me 1 second, she whispered. She mumbled an excuse to a colleague and hurried out from behind the counter. We walked to a quieter, deserted corridor near the luxury boutiques. Diana looked at me, her voice trembling slightly. Why are you looking for me? I looked at her. How long have you been seeing Harry? She immediately shook her head. I don't know, Harry. I laughed. A very light, effortless laugh. Then, I pulled out my phone, pulled up the screenshot from last night, and held the screen up to her face. Do you want me to read this out loud? Diana stared at the screen. In a matter of seconds, she turned ashen. She didn't say a word. I put my phone away. I told you, I'm not here to cause a scene. Diana looked at me, her eyes full of confusion and dread. Then what do you want? I looked her dead in the eye. You think Harry is about to sell his house to start a new life with you, don't you? She didn't answer, but the look in her eyes confirmed it. I nodded slowly. Then I think there's something you should know. Diana swallowed hard. What? I spoke calmly. Harry is broke. She froze. That's impossible. I shrugged. He was $500,000 in debt. I just paid it off for him this morning. Diana stared at me in sheer disbelief. You're lying. I smiled. I have no reason to lie to you. I took a half step closer, but there is one detail you're missing. Diana stared. I spoke very slowly, enunciating every word. Right now, he owes me $500,000. She stood there, completely paralyzed. The hallway fell dead silent. I looked at her for a few seconds, then turned around to leave. Before I walked away, I tossed one last sentence over my shoulder. You can stay with him if you want. I won't stop you. I took a few steps, then paused. Without looking back, I added, but just remember one thing. He is no longer a man who can buy you a $1.5 million beach house. I kept walking toward the elevators. Behind me, Diana stood completely motionless. At that very moment, her dream of becoming a wealthy Malibu housewife shattered into a million pieces. The Galleria corridor was brightly lit, but for Diana, everything around her had suddenly gone dim. She stood frozen, watching my silhouette disappear into the elevator bay. The words I just spoke echoed relentlessly in her mind. Harry is broke. He owes me $500,000. Diana swallowed hard. For months, Harry had constantly bragged to her about his luxurious lifestyle. He talked about his stunning Malibu beach house and how simply liquidating that property would give them enough cash to buy a bigger place and start their own life. He used to tell her, I'm just waiting for the right moment. Once everything is lined up, I'll file the divorce papers. Diana had believed him. She didn't just believe him. She had mentally designed her entire future. A gorgeous house, a successful man, a life of endless financial security. But just minutes ago, I had taken a sledgehammer to all of it. She stood there for a long time until a coworker yelled down the hall. Diana, you have a client waiting. She snapped out of it. Right, coming. But for the rest of her shift, Diana couldn't focus on anything. Every time she looked at her phone, she remembered the calm, icy look in my eyes. A woman with that kind of composure wasn't the type to lie about a failing marriage, and Harry, his voice on the phone earlier, clearly indicated he was hiding a massive crisis. Around 8 p.m., after clocking out, Diana instantly called Harry. It rang for a long time before he finally picked up. Hey, his voice sounded exhausted. Diana walked out to the parking garage, keeping her voice low. Where are you? Home. She was quiet for a second. I just met your wife. Dead silence on the other end of the line. Harry spoke slowly. She found you? Yeah. What did she say? Diana bit her lip. She said you owe $500,000. The silence stretched out, the cold wind whipping through the concrete parking structure, tangling her hair. Finally, Harry said, Don't listen to her. She's just trying to ruin us. Diana frowned. But she said, She paid it off for you. Harry instantly snapped. I told you, don't believe her. His aggressive tone startled Diana. She lowered her voice. Tell me the truth, Harry. Are you in debt? Harry was quiet. It was only a few seconds, but it was enough for Diana to figure it out. She sighed. You really are, aren't you? Harry scrambled. I'm going to fix it. I just need a little more time. Diana stood still. She had heard those promises a dozen times already. She asked the final question. What about the beach house? Harry answered immediately. I'm still going to sell it. Diana paused. But your wife said the deed is in her name. Harry let out a dark chuckle. She thinks that's enough to stop me. But she doesn't know. He trailed off. There are other ways. Diana frowned. What does that mean? Harry didn't answer directly, Just trust me. I won't let you down." He hung up. But as Diana sat in her car for the first time, a totally foreign feeling crept in. Extreme suspicion. She remembered my eyes at the mall calm, certain, totally unlike a hysterical wife who just discovered an affair. And Harry? He sounded like a cornered rat. She didn't start the engine. Instead, she opened her texts and scrolled back through Harry's messages. The sweet talk, the promises, the grand future plans. She stared at the screen for a long time before whispering to herself, "Am I being played?" Meanwhile, back at the Malibu house, Harry was sitting alone in his office. The yellow desk lamp cast harsh shadows across his stressed face. Spread across the desk was the folder of promissory notes I had given him. He flipped through the pages. The total, $500,000. Harry clenched his fists. "Lauren," his voice dropped to a growl. "You think you've won?" He stood up, walked to the balcony, and stared out at the pitch-black ocean. The waves were crashing violently. Harry pulled out his phone and dialed a number. A few rings later, a voice answered. "Why are you calling me this late?" Harry spoke quietly. "I need a favor." "What kind of favor?" Harry stared out into the dark water and said something no one could have predicted. "I need the title and deed for a beachfront property." The line went quiet for a moment. "What are you planning to do?" Harry smirked in the dark. "Take back what's rightfully mine." That night, the ocean was turbulent. Gale force winds whipped across the Malibu coastline, violently shaking the palm trees and rattling the heavy glass windows of the house. The sky was pitch black, occasionally illuminated by lightning strikes far offshore. I stood in my home office, looking down at the beach. My mind, however, was incredibly at peace. After days of high-stakes maneuvering, I knew the climax of this story had arrived, because I already knew exactly what Harry was doing. That afternoon, Vicky had called me. "Lauren, I think you need to brace yourself." "Why?" "Harry is actively looking for someone to forge the deed and title documents for the house." I wasn't shocked. In fact, I smiled. Who did he contact? "A guy known for producing fake notary stamps and fraudulent real estate docs," Vicky replied. I looked out at the ocean. "Good." Vicky was taken aback. "Good?" "Yes," I said slowly. "He just backed himself into a corner he can never get out of." 2 days later, Harry made his move. That morning, right after I dropped Leo off at school and drove back, there was a strange black sedan parked outside my gate. 2 LAPD detectives and a fraud investigator were standing in the driveway. Helen ran out of the house in a panic. "What's going on?" One of the detectives stepped forward. "We're looking for Harry." Right on cue, Harry walked out the front door. Seeing the police badges, he froze in his tracks. "Can I help you?" The investigator pulled out a thick file. "Sir, you are under investigation for conspiracy to commit real estate fraud, forgery of legal documents, and attempted grand larceny." All the color drained from Harry's face. "No, I haven't done anything." The investigator flipped the folder open, revealing copies of Harry's encrypted messages with the forger, the fake contracts, and digital trails proving he attempted to initiate an illegal escrow behind my back. Harry's head snapped toward me. "Lauren, Lauren." I stood a few yards away, perfectly composed. "No," I said softly. "You did this to yourself." The investigator continued. "We've also received reports regarding the illegal interest rates on your previous private loans, which are now part of a larger financial crimes probe." Harry was stunned. "But I paid those off." I stepped forward. "Yes, I paid them." I stared right through him. "But the loans were flagged for racketeering during the transfer." Vicky stepped out of my car, carrying her briefcase. "My client merely provided the authorities with the documentation requested." Harry looked at me, utterly betrayed. "Lauren, you ruined me." I shook my head. "No," I said slowly. "You ruined yourself." Helen finally realized the magnitude of what was happening. She lunged toward me. "Lauren, you vindictive, evil woman." I looked at her. "Do you remember what you told me the other day?" She froze. I reminded her. "You said this house belonged to your son." I gestured to the massive estate behind me. "But you forgot one thing. This house never belonged to him." The 2 detectives stepped forward. "Harry, we need you to come downtown with us." Harry stood paralyzed for several seconds before finally dropping his head in defeat. As the officers escorted him past me, he stopped and whispered, "Lauren, in 8 years, did you ever truly love me?" I stayed quiet for a long time. Finally, I answered, "I did." He looked up. "But the man I loved," I said, "is not the man standing in front of me today." Harry was put in the back of the cruiser. The car rolled out of the driveway, disappearing down the PCH. Helen stood frozen in the courtyard, her face hollow with shock. I turned my back and walked inside my house. The ocean wind was still howling, but the sky on the horizon was beginning to clear. A massive storm had finally passed. 3 months later, I stood on the balcony of my Malibu beach house, watching my son Leo run along the sand below. The sun was dipping into the Pacific, painting the sky in brilliant strokes of orange and magenta. Vicky stood next to me, handing me a glass of wine. "So, it's finally over." I took the glass. "Yeah." She looked at me. "Do you have any regrets?" I thought for a few seconds, then shook my head. "No." I looked out at the ocean. "Some people walk into your life purely to teach you a lesson." Vicky smiled. "What lesson?" I took a sip of wine. "That sometimes, losing a terrible husband." I looked down at Leo, who was laughing, as the waves chased his feet, "is the only way to save your own life." The ocean breeze swept across the balcony. I closed my eyes for a second. An old chapter of my life had officially closed. And this time, I was truly free. The lesson of the story. Through this story, we can take away a profound lesson about marriage, greed, and the importance of self-worth. In a marriage, the most important thing is not money or property, but mutual respect and honesty. When a person is willing to deceive, scheme, and steal from their own spouse, that marriage is already destined to shatter. Lauren, the protagonist, loved deeply, endured quietly, and worked tirelessly to build her family for 8 years. But when her trust was ultimately betrayed, she chose to stand up and fiercely protect herself and her future. That was not an act of cold vengeance. It was the sharp clarity of a woman who finally recognized her own value. Life will sometimes hand us agonizing betrayals, but those exact moments often reveal who truly deserves a place in our lives. And sometimes, walking away from someone who doesn't respect you is the greatest thing you can do to save yourself. If you found today's story meaningful, and it gave you something to reflect on regarding life and relationships, please don't forget to like this video to support the channel. Leave a comment below sharing your thoughts on the story, and share this video so others can listen and reflect as well. Most importantly, make sure to subscribe to Twilight Tales so you never miss our stories of everyday life, deep lessons, and moments of reflection on human nature. Thank you all so much for listening today. We will see you in the next story.